Hello, everyone. How are you guys? Welcome to our webinar. Today we have a very
Hello.
special guest, Yuvraj. Hey, how
Thank
are
you.
you?
Thank you for welcoming me. I'm doing good. How are you?
Amazing. I'm so happy to have you here because you have some special information to
Likewise.
share with us. Yeah. So as I
Absolutely.
have heard, you have like 7 years of experience using WordPress. If it's not a secret, may I ask
Yeah.
you what was your first project with WordPress?
Okay. That's an embarrassing story because I wanted to have a tech publication, like a worldwide publication similar to Mashable. So I set up my own tech blog using a free theme and doing some stuff around WordPress, experimenting with widgets and stuff. So it was a disaster. It looked terrible and it went nowhere. So that was my first experience hands-on with WordPress. It took me a week to install WordPress on the server in the first place.
Amazing. You never gonna forget your first website. That's how it works,
Yeah.
yeah, doesn't it? All right, so I
Right.
wanted to inform our
I'm sure you
viewers
remember your
that,
first as well.
oh yeah, mine was a sushi blog. I used to be a sushi chef, so I made a blog about sushi. It was a long time ago as well. All right, so
Nice.
I would like to inform our viewers that during this webinar, you can ask questions. This webinar is being
Mhm.
streamed simultaneously on the multiple channels. So if you have any questions, you can ask them during the webinar. So I guess I'm not going to waste our time. Yuvraj, he's got some amazing information to share with us. So the stage is yours.
So this is my slides. I'll be presenting side by side. I'm talking to you guys and explaining my thoughts about WordPress speed optimization, which obviously you know about. And just let's start with the basics first. Why you need high-performance websites. It's kind of an obvious question, but a lot of people don't realize the importance of having high-performance websites. So just imagine you're going to a store and you're buying some stuff, and then you're waiting in the checkout line, and it takes few minutes for the line to just start moving. So you wait 5 minutes, you wait 10 minutes, you wait 15 minutes, and then ultimately it's a frustrating experience for you if you can't get what you want at the same time. So similar thing happens with websites. If they're not fast, if they're not responsive, they're not quick to load, then it's not a great experience. And Google has been prioritizing good experience for probably the past few years, that your websites should take user experience seriously, and speed is part of that. We'll talk about that as we progress through the video or the webinar. So you might have heard a lot of statistics as well. Numbers are okay. Some website or Amazon maybe reduced 100 milliseconds of the response time, and they got millions and millions of dollars in revenue. So that's part of that as well. So ultimately, when you have a fast website, it performs better. Your users are happier, and you generate more sales, more revenue, and that's the most important part, right? If you are building a website, specifically if it's a hobby blog, then that's fine. But if you have a business associated with your website, you want it to be performing pretty fast for you to have optimum, or say, revenue generation for your business. So that's the first thing that I would like to emphasize, that people who don't know or who don't realize the importance, it is very important to have a very fast, high performing website. Let's move on. First of all, I would like to talk about the website optimization minds, because as I mentioned, some people don't take website optimization or speed seriously, but some people take it too seriously. They are just obsessed with numbers, and they're obsessed with reducing everything they can to make the website as fast as possible. That can be counterproductive as well. I'll talk about that why. So just hear me out right now. Imagine that, okay, you're trying to buy a car, right? When you're trying to buy a car, what do you prioritize? Do you prioritize always the fastest car, or do you prioritize a car that has good cost, or you can drive it better, it's comfortable, it has some features? I'm pretty sure you know the answer, but let me give you an exaggerated example of what I'm trying to say. Fast is not always better. Let me emphasize, or let me clarify what I mean. We have all seen F1 races, the Grand Prix, right? So F1 cars are really fast, right? Really fast. But this is how you sit inside an F1 car. Can you see how uncomfortable that is? It's very weird to sit it. And look at the image on the right. It has tons of buttons. So the F1 car is really fast, perhaps multiple times faster than a consumer car that you can buy, a minivan or maybe a sedan. But it has a terrible experience, especially for people who are not used to driving that cars. First of all, the car only sees one person at a time. You can drive really fast, but you need years of training to drive this kind of car. And it's not safe at all. If you crash, there is a legitimate risk of dying from the fuel fire. So it's not safe. It's not comfortable, only seats one person at a time. So this is one example of why fast is not always better, right? So when we are optimizing websites, or when we are improving the performance of websites, we don't only focus on speed. Speed is a very important component of that, but you have to prioritize user experience as a whole. And speed is, I would say, a decent chunk of that, but you have to understand that not only speed, or if you're just trying to look at the numbers that, okay, my website was loading in 3 seconds earlier, now it should load in 2.5 seconds. You should look at the bigger picture and see if that is going to make a big difference to your bottom line, and also does it make a huge difference if you can reduce that time. Also, when you're looking at website optimization and speed, you also have to look at resources spent, right? For example, if you have the goal of maybe website load time by half a second, how much resource would you spend to do that, and how much business benefit can you derive out of that? This is an important question to understand as well, because as I said, a lot of people just look at the numbers that, okay, Amazon reduces 100 milliseconds and they make millions of dollars, but they already are a $1 trillion company. They have tons of traffic already. They have a lot of people working specifically for just website speed optimization, and they have their own cloud-based infrastructure, so they can spend the resources to optimize their website to that level. But should you do it, or is it even a good business decision to do so? That's the thing that you need to ask before you start the optimization process. Everybody understands this perspective, and Google, I'll also talk about why Google is also moving away from just speed or just the number of like the load time that we'll usually think about, and moving towards a more user experience based metrics to understand website performance. So we'll talk about that as well. Moving on. As I said, user experience is more important than speed. We'll look at some specific things as we go along in the webinar, but I hope everybody understands. And if you did understand what I said, so then make sure to leave a comment. Or if you have still any doubts, then also leave a comment. We'll address that at the end of the webinar. All right, let's move on. So this is what I was talking about. If you're not already aware, Google usually publishes updates, but the specific update I'm talking about is the update that's going to happen on May 21st, 2021. And that will now prioritize user signals or user experience over website speed. So this is the exact same thing that I'm talking about. And the name is usually, the name that is associated with this update is called Core Web Vitals, as you can see on the screen right there. CWV, that's the abbreviation. So you want to start hearing this term a lot on the web, on publications that talk about SEO, website performance. And we have to consider CWV as a more important metric to look at rather than just website load times. And there's a difference, and it's a huge difference. And when I talk about the CWV and the metrics that make up the CWV, you'll understand what I mean. All right. Now, we have the set basis of information about what is important about website and what should we look at to improve website speed, what's the mindset. But we haven't talked about why our website's slow in the first place, right? This is important. Otherwise, if we don't know the problem, we can't come up with a solution, right? So we have to talk about the reasons. Now, there are tons of reasons, but I've just made a small collection of most common problems that we have when we're talking about slow websites. Let me open up the slide for you. So these are all the most common reasons I would say that websites are slow. The first and most important is the kind of host that you use. So if your host is not great, then you're going to have slow websites no matter what you do. The second is a visitor's location. So if your visitor is very far from your server's location, it takes some time for the data to travel around the web. We'll talk about how to counteract each of these say issues or root causes. So don't worry about that. Next important point is a poorly coded theme. Now, when you're building WordPress websites, you always have a third-party theme. No, majority of the people don't use the default WordPress themes. So theme is the most important part that like presents to the user, and it has to be really, really coded well, and it has to optimize itself for performance. If it's not, then it's like think of all these elements connected together as a chain. It's the weakest element that will cause the problem. So no matter if everything is good, but you have a bad host, you are going to have problems. If everything is good and only your theme is bad, then also you will have website or speed, a slowed website. So all of these have to be optimized together in synchronicity or whatever you like to call it, for it to have the best optimization or the best results across the website performance. All right. Again, the next point is the poorly coded plugins. Now, plugins are also, as you probably know, apps for your website. And on any healthy website, you have anywhere from maybe 5 to 25. Some people have 35, 40 plugins. And any plugin that you have, which is not really good coded well to optimize the resources that it uses, is going to cause problems again. Next is unoptimized database. So for non-tech users, database is where all the information from your website is actually stored. The post data, the CSS, the styling, and every information is actually stored in a database. Think of it as your room and you have all this information. For example, you can see some books behind me. So think of it as a database. So if that is not optimized, your website server will have a hard time finding the information that's looking for. Just imagine if all those books were not stacked cleanly and just like lying around the house, then I would have a hard time to find the book that I was looking for. So similar way, you need to have an optimized database. Again, we'll talk about specific products, specific steps you can take to optimize each of these. Then next is no caching. Now caching, if you don't know, we'll talk about that. So that's one important point. Next is unoptimized images. Now, images are one of the biggest things on a website, usually in terms of just a size. So if your web page is maybe 20 kilobytes, then image can anywhere be 100 kilobytes or 500 kilobytes. And depending on a camera that you use, it can be even 25 megabytes. So if you don't optimize your images, it's going to be a big bottleneck on your entire page when images are trying to be loaded on your website. So it's very important to have the optimized images. Next is too many scripts. So if you are familiar with building websites, then you know that now you have to have a Facebook pixel on your website, maybe Twitter pixel, and all these websites that you want to target users on, they all have their own pixels. Then you might have external scripts that you want to load, maybe JavaScript, for example, Google Analytics, and some other analytics solutions. So all these scripts also will take up resources in loading. So you have to make sure that you don't have too many scripts. And if you have, or the essential scripts that you do have, you have to make sure that it's optimized well. And we'll talk about some of the ways that you can do that as well. And next step is ads. Now, this is not exactly a very separate point because it kind of comes in scripts because they're loaded from external resources. So if you have too many ads on your website, again, it's going to slow down. So you also have to optimize. I understand that a lot of people who are building websites want to make revenue out of it using ads, but you have to find a balance between a good experience and the number of ads that you have, especially if your website is dependent on SEO traffic for revenue. All right. So if you understood, or if you have any other reason that you know of that causes websites to slow down, leave that in the comments. And if you liked what you just seeing, make sure to leave a thumbs up in the video. And let's move on to the most important, or the next part of the webinar, which is misconceptions about slow websites. Now, I've seen a lot of people totally optimize the wrong parts when they're trying to optimize their website. And this again connects with all the things that I've been talking about, the optimization part, but they maybe don't have the right information. So I want to clear the air about what are the misconceptions that slow down websites. There are mostly two things when I talk about. First, too many plugins and theme and plugin updates. Now, as you can see on the screen, this is a website that has 35 plugins installed and 28 active plugins. This is not a slow website because the number of plugins that you install on a website does not matter. I'm calling it. It does not matter. But even if you have a very low number of plugins on your website and the plugin, even one of the plugin is not optimized, then it's going to be a problem. So this is what happens usually when people install a lot of plugins. Maybe one of them is not optimized. And what they feel is that, okay, because I have a number of plugins, now that is called the problem. That is not the problem. So you have to find out which plugins are the problem. And we're not going to specifically talk about that part, but I'm just clearing the air about number of plugins usually does not matter. The second part is not updating your themes and plugins, right? This is another misconception. People say, okay, WordPress has updated, let's update and we'll have a better, faster website. That is also not true. Unless the product itself has improved in speed a lot. For example, if you're using a theme and theme update is released, and the theme update is just bug fixes, and you update it, you're not going to see any improvement in speed. But if the theme itself has been worked on by the developers to have better performance, maybe they do some kind of code minimization or load any specific resources at the same time, or anything that they can do to make the website better or faster, or the theme faster, only then you're going to see improvements in your website speed. So it doesn't matter if you're updating your themes or plugins, it does not affect your website speed. Now, I'm not talking about security. Sometimes plugin updates or theme updates are critical if they have security issues, but don't expect that every time you hit that update button, you're going to see a boost in performance on your website. These are two important things to understand. And I hope you like that information because I've seen a lot of people not understanding or not knowing about this information. All right, moving on.
Could I ask something?
Measuring your website speed, right? So now yeah, sure.
Let's go back to plugins. Do you think it's a good idea not to install plugins that are outdated, haven't been updated for 2 years or something like that?
definitely, if it's not been updated for at least a year, I would say definitely make sure that it's secure, because speed is something else. Maybe the plugin has decent performance even after not being updated for some time. But during that time, a lot of zero-day vulnerabilities also are discovered. So it's important to understand that the plugin is actually secure. So I don't know if any tools exist to check it out, but you should make that call only after knowing that, okay, even if performance is not going to be an issue, at least security shouldn't be an issue. Does that clarify?
Thanks.
All right. Coming back to measuring your speed. So we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about why speed important, the optimization process, what causes a slow website. But there's an engineering term that I don't know if you've heard of. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. So as I was saying that, okay, a lot of people are obsessed with numbers, and I'm not talking about numbers as well. So that's not the same numbers I'm talking about. I'll clarify when we go into little specifics. So the point is that you have to have some kind of benchmark to see if you've improved, right? So it's, for example, if you're watching a weight, you probably get on the scale and then see, okay, if the scale is moved in the positive or negative direction, or you check how your clothes fit, or you feel better, your skin feels better. You have some metrics in mind that you look at to understand if you are improving in any manner. So website optimization is also similar. You have to understand, or you have to look at some of the numbers to understand if your performance is going better. And we'll talk about that. This is an old screenshot, right? The thing I want to highlight is the TTFB, time to first byte, and fully loaded time. These were two important numbers. They are still important, but they, as I said, Google is now moving past just fully loaded time. So these were important numbers that usually most of the people focused on. Time to first byte is user server places request and the first byte that comes back from the server. And the fully loaded time was as soon as the user clicked the enter button or touched on the screen and the website was completely loaded. So this was the metric that was earlier used, but it is now being phased out or is not considered the most important number in terms of optimization. So if you're still focusing on this number, I would say watch through the webinar completely. You'll understand how to optimize those things better. Okay. CWE, Core Web Vitals. This is the most important part of the webinar because Google is now focusing exclusively on these metrics, on measuring how it measures or how it sees website performance. So we're going to discuss all this, but I'm not going to go into a lot of specifics on how to do specific tasks to improve these numbers, because the things that we're going to discuss will affect all these anyway. But I want you to understand what these are, because it's going to be more and more important, and because it's not released yet, so we don't know how much importance Google is going to place on them on day one. They'll be more important as time goes on, but on day one, we don't know. So it's very important to understand what these numbers mean or what these metrics mean, and then whatever we discuss, the solutions will obviously improve on all these metrics. So we have three important metrics. There are others as well, but these are the most important ones. You have largest contentful paint, LCP. You have a first input delay, which is FID. And then you have cumulative layout shift, CLS. Now, these are very scary sounding metrics, but it's pretty simple to understand. I'm going to give you an example. So let's start with the FID one, because that's the most interesting part. Let's assume you go to a restaurant, right? You walk in, you find an empty seat, and then you go and sit down. And then you just wait for someone to just take your order. And then you still wait. And then you wait some more. And then you keep waiting until someone just comes in and gives a menu to you or even takes your order. It's not a great experience, right? So you can think of that as the FID, or the first input delay. The idea is that you were ready to give an input, but nobody was there to accept your input. And you might have experienced this on websites. If you open up a website and you're trying to search for something, but the page is loading. So even if you're touching the search bar, nothing happens. Or you're trying to fill a field in maybe a checkout form. The page is loading in the background. You can't touch and just enter the information that you want to add. So this is obviously a bad experience. So the FID metric defines how quickly can users start inputting data on the website, right? Well, obviously, it's most important on pages with checkout fields, a lot of fields, but most of websites have search fields as well. So we have to optimize how quickly can users start interacting or start giving input to your website. It's important. So this is FID. Is everybody on board right now? Everybody understood what I said? Should I clarify more or talk more about these numbers? If you do, then leave a comment, okay? Then the second is largest contentful paint, right? So again, going back to the LC restaurant example, now you've given your order and then you have ordered some snacks, maybe you order a drink, you order some starters, And then you finish all that, and then you're waiting for your main course to arrive. Okay, and then you're waiting for main course to arrive again, and then you still wait and wait, and now your hunger is dying off because you've been waiting for a while, and then the dinner comes and it's delicious. The food is great, but you waited so long that you don't enjoy the meal as much as you could have if the dinner arrived or the main course arrived much quicker. So this is a similar example of largest contentful page, right? Your website has a lot of pages or a lot of content on every single page. Maybe it has a text block, or whenever you look at a page, you can define a chunk of the page that can be called the most important part of the page. So sometimes if you have a blog post, then the menu is not the most important part, or the header is not the most important, the footer is maybe not the most important, the sidebar is not the most important, but the actual content, the title, the text that is on the screen, the images on the screen, that is the most important. So the idea is that LCP defines how quickly was the largest paint done on the page. So if you have a blog post, how quickly was the biggest area of the web page painted on the screen? Painted is a term to define how loaded, but it means the same thing. So this is the metric that is, or that defines how quickly that happens. So we have covered FID, we've covered LCP. Both are important metrics to understand. Coming to cumulative layout shift. Again, going back to the restaurant example, right? For example, you're about to dig into your food and enjoy a delicious meal, whatever you would like to eat. And the host comes in and asks you to move to a different part of the restaurant. Okay, it's really far off, and you have to take your food and go and sit there, and maybe the food gets cold in between. Again, it's not a great experience, right? And you might have experienced this on websites, especially with websites with a lot of ads. You're trying to open up a website, you open up something, and as soon as you want to touch something, something loads, right? Sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's an ad, and you end up touching something else. And then if you accidentally touch an ad, then it opens another browser and a lot of things happening. And it's not a great experience. You have to close all the tabs and go back to the actual website you were talking or watching. So this is what is defined as cumulative layout shift. It's a number that defines how much of your layout shifts during the page load, right? So when the website loading, if the images are loading and the website shifts a lot, then the number will be higher. If nothing shifts much, the number will be lower. So you have to make sure that CLS, or cumulative layout shift, is also minimal. Okay. So these are core web vitals. And again, as you can obviously understand, the largest contentful paint, as I talked about, will define or is very similar to the overall load time number. But load time also included asynchronous Java load, the JavaScript loads, and all those metrics which don't matter as much to the user, right? So if a user is trying to read a blog post, he doesn't care if the Facebook pixel is loaded, right? But the actual number that we used earlier, the total load time, that included that number as well. So it didn't matter to the user, or it did not matter to the user. That's why Google is moving away from that metrics and focusing on core web vitals. I hope everybody is still following. This can be a little overwhelming to understand, because especially if it's new, and I hope I did a decent job of explaining what these numbers are and how they affect, or how they will start affecting performance and metrics and measurement. All right. I hope everybody is on page. If you're not, leave a comment. We'll address every question that we get, or we'll try to address every question that we get in the comments. Okay, moving on. Now coming to the most important part, right? Speeding up our website, improving the speed. What do we do, right? We have talked about all theory and what happens and why we should do it, but we haven't talked about the actual meat of the video. What do I need to do to improve website speeds? This is what you've actually arrived to the webinar for. We're going to divide the improvements that we're going to talk about in two different sections. First is the off-site improvements that you don't actually do on your website, obviously, and on-site improvements, the things that you can do on your website to improve speed. And you'll understand why we have done that once we progress through the webinar. So starting off, the first important thing, off-site improvements. Obviously, there can be much more improvements that we can talk about, but these are the same things mostly that we talked about before or the problems that we had, right? If you remember the slide that we talked about, what causes a website to slow down, the off-site improvements are almost the same, right? These are the things that you need to focus on. So the first problem that we talked about was your hosting. If you don't have a great host, then you're going to have problems. And again, as I mentioned, it's the weakest link that causes the problem. So everything has to be at least perform good enough so that it does not cause any problems, right? So the first offsite improvement you need to make is choosing a good host. This is I would say the most important aspect, because no matter what you do, if your host is not good, you're not going to see improvements. And host, usually a lot of people focus on the price first, and some people look at the different kinds of metrics. But yeah, there are so many metrics to look at. But you should look at, as I said, maybe a good server with SSD storage, and Devadass is probably a better person to talk about this because Hostinger is a fantastic host, and we highly recommend that you check out Hostinger. So maybe he'll talk about why or what factors are part of a good host once we end the webinar. All right. So choosing a good host is critical. And as I mentioned, do remember, all of these have to be optimized in conjunction. You can't just leave one of the things off the table and then expect performance to be good. You have to have everything in place, right? The second is visitor's location. Now you can't change your visitor's location, but you can change or choose the location of your server, right? So many hosts, including Hostinger, also supports multiple locations for servers. For example, data center in India, maybe a data center in the UK or somewhere else. And you have to have the visitor close to your server as much as possible. For example, if you have majority of your traffic coming from the USA, then what you can do is have the server in the USA or as close to the USA as possible. Now think with this as like if you're ordering pizza, right? And you have only one pizza store, which is maybe 100 miles away from your house. So if you order pizza, it's going to take some time to arrive to your house. But if they have multiple branches, so no matter where you place your order, they can just route the order to the nearest branch close to your house, and then pizza can arrive quicker. So this is the same thing with data with regards to websites. Whenever any user tries to access your website, they have to be sent a lot of information about your website from your server to their browser. So the smaller the distance between both of them, the faster it's going to take, or the faster it's going to be for the data to arrive to their location. So this is important consideration. So make sure that you do that. Next is again poorly coded theme. Then obviously you have to choose a high performance theme to ensure that you have great performance. And I represent Brainstorm Force, and I highly recommend that you check out the Astra theme. We are completely focused on performance, and we are completely compatible with all the things that you can think of: WooCommerce compatibility, LearnDash compatibility, Elementor, page builders. And we will focus exclusively on performance so much that it's one of the most popular themes right now. And over 1 million people actually use Astra, which is the only theme to do so actually about after the WordPress default theme. So Astra is the only theme which with more than 1 million customers or 1 million users, I would say. And that's an important consideration, because they use Astra because it's good. So make sure to check out Astra, and I'll leave links down in the description for you to check out. Coming to, again, poorly coded plugins. So you have to choose plugins that are high performance. So whenever you're installing a plugin, whenever you're considering a plugin to have on your website, always prioritize performance. Does this slow down my website? And there are plenty of tools and plugins to check it out. There was a plugin a while back called P3 Performance, and I don't know if it's actively maintained, but what that plugin did was you could install that plugin and it would run your website or execute your website, any page, and then tell you which plugins are causing the most time to execute their code or trying to fetch the data. So you have to look at those data as well when you are considering any plugins. Don't look at just the functionality. Think of it as a mixed package, functionality plus optimization or speed. Coming to no caching. So obviously you have to have caching on your website. What is caching? We'll talk about it. If you already don't know, we'll talk about caching as we progress. Again, unoptimized images, you have to optimize your images. It's absolutely critical. If you've been interested in mobile phones, then you know that mobile phones have 100 megapixel cameras right now. So if you can take a picture, a 100 megapixel picture, and just upload it to your website is going to slow down to a halt no matter how optimized your site is, because it's a gigantic image in itself. So you have to optimize your images. We'll talk about that in later or in more detail as we progress. Again, too many scripts and ads. Just make sure that you have a healthy mix of scripts. Again, if you remember when we talk about the LCP metric, so LCP will automatically not consider scripts if they load asynchronously. So if the page loads and then scripts load, it's not going to be a huge issue. But again, if you have the option of optimizing it, then it's better. For example, if you are using Google Analytics and it takes a long time to load on your server, you can probably host it locally or something like this. In similar manner, if you have some external scripts, you can try to optimize them or maybe defer them or something. Any kind of optimization you can have for scripts. Again, with ads, it's the same story. Don't have too many ads, or at least measure the performance impact and revenue impact against website optimization. If your website depends solely on SEO for traffic, having too many ads, which slows down the performance, is going to affect your rankings, maybe right now or at least in the future. So make sure that you make a conscious decision on how many ads you can run, and try to have optimize your ads as much as possible. Many ad networks also provide optimization services that they'll come to your website, and if you have enough traffic, they'll give you one-to-one tips also on how to place or how many ads to place or how to optimize the ad placements performance. So all these are very important. These are all off-site improvements, and usually what you would do, or you would do this before your website usually goes live, at least for most of them. For example, you can change the theme, you can change the plugin. And sorry, I missed the point of unoptimized database. We already talked about that. So we'll talk about how to optimize the database in more detail. So most of these decisions, as I was saying, will be taken before you start your website. So make sure good host is very important, and the server location is very important. And then when you have your website up and running, obviously I will recommend you choose that. So Astra theme, and then plugins and everything that you do, have a conscious decision of considering performance as one of the important factors whenever you make any change to your site. For example, if you're adding multiple plugins, then keep performance as one of the important metrics that you consider. All right, I hope that makes sense. And let's move on to the on-site improvements. What we're going to do. Okay. All right, so I already covered this. Right, so choosing the right server location, as I was mentioning, Hostinger has 7 different regions that they support. So they support the UK, US, Brazil, Netherlands, Singapore, Indonesia, and Lithuania, which is coming soon. So if, for example, if you are building a website in Brazil and you want to serve exclusively, or most of your visitors are from Brazil, then what you can do is have a location server deployed in Brazil itself. So that'll have the least latency and have the best performance. And for you all gamers out there, I've noticed that they have Minecraft server hosting as well. So make sure that you use it if you are hosting Minecraft parties with your friends or hosting a Minecraft server. All right. So I think I already covered this. Using a CDN. All right. This is one important point. So using a CDN. Now, if for people who don't know what a CDN is, which I don't know how many of you don't know, CDN means a content delivery network, right? CDN, content delivery network. And it's just a network that delivers content. I know, pretty amazing explanation of that. But going back to the pizza delivery example, right? If for example, let's say the pizza store that I was talking about, that you order pizza and they have one really big store, right? That's the main store. That's the biggest store that they have. But they also have some stores maybe throughout the city which don't serve users in the walking through the door, but exclusively built to deliver orders, right? So for example, if you have a location and they have one location which does not serve customers who walk in the door, but only are built so that they can take care of deliveries. So CDN is similar to that. So what a CDN does in a website perspective is take the data from a website. For example, maybe it's your images, it's your scripts, or any kind of static content, and just places it in multiple servers around the globe, right? So as an example, we were talking about starting a website in Brazil. Now, maybe you have 50% of your audience in Brazil, but rest of them are like just around the world, maybe from India. How do you serve both of those users quickly? Because if you choose a location in Brazil, the users from India are not going to get the best latency. And if you choose a location close to Singapore, which is in Asia, then you will not have the best performance for users in Brazil or maybe the West or UK or US. So CDN takes care of that problem quite a lot. So what it can do is just take your content and have every server that they have in the CDN host that content for you as well. So it's like a copy of your server, but not exactly technically. And what it can do is whenever a user requests data, so the server or the CDN server closest to your location or the visitor's location can serve the user. So it's like having your multiple servers working for you. So it's amazing thing, and you should definitely consider using CDNs if you have any kind of decent traffic, or if you have a worldwide audience. It's a very inexpensive way to have a distributed network of servers serving your visitors, right? Coming to the next point, these CDNs, there are tons of CDNs out there, but I personally used 2 CDNs which I recommend. So Key CDN and Cloudflare. Key CDN is a fantastic host. Cloudflare is also a fantastic CDN. There are plenty of others. For example, you might have heard of Max CDN or StackPath, but these are CDNs that are designed for beginners, right? So you can just sign up and invest a very minimum amount of money in them and just start using the CDN. And Cloudflare also offers a free tier. So even if you are not using any CDN, don't pay for it. You can use Cloudflare CDN and have a lot of your content hosted for you for free. So that's amazing. So make sure to check those out. And I'll try to add links to every product that I mentioned in the description, not instantaneously, but after the webinar has ended, maybe in some time, I'll collect those links and add it to the description. And if you don't know these products or you want to have questions, make sure you leave it in the comments. I'm open to answering any questions if you have. Moving on, using a high performance DNS. Now, for people who don't know what a DNS is, it's very important to understand that part as well, because this also causes one of the biggest challenges in terms of website performance improvement. Now, I'd like to give you another example. Let's say you're trying to make a phone call. You're trying to call a friend. Maybe his name is Rohit, which is an Indian name. So what you do, you bring up your dialer, you type in his name, and then you make a call. Now, what your phone has to do is take that name, find out what his actually number is, and then dial the call, right? It's pretty obvious. But there is a small, very, very tiny delay when you're dealing with a mobile phone. In that time, that mobile phone, you actually touched his name, and the phone finds his number that is associated with the name. But when you're dealing with websites, this is a little different. Now, for websites, when you talk about, okay, hostinger.com, maybe google.com, maybe wpastra.com, these are names for websites, but this is not how the web actually operates. Web operates on IP addresses. For example, if you have a name, but if you're maybe in the US, you have a social security number, right? That's a unique number assigned to you. In India, we have Aadhaar. That's so similar to social security. So every person in the world usually has some sort of identity which is associated with a unique number. And websites have IP addresses. So whenever you type in a name of a website in the browser and go to the website, that name has to be translated to the IP address, and then you can go to the server, or then only then the process of actually transferring the data or users going to the website happens. So the smaller this time is, the faster it's going to be for users to access the website. It's kind of obvious. So DNS stands for Domain Name System, and it's just a phone book. You can think of it as a phone book. And whenever a user tries to access a website, the first a DNS server is actually accessed, and the DNS server tells, okay, this website, this name is actually this IP address, so you should go to this IP address. And this routing takes some time. So if you are using this mostly depends on your domain name provider. So if your domain name provider does not have a high performance DNS, then you're going to have slowdowns in your website. So you have to use a very high performance DNS. Hostinger is fantastic as well, but I'm going to recommend a couple of premium solutions as well. And if you have business goals, if you want to make some money, you want to generate some revenue, this is a must have, because this is the cheapest to do. And it has, I would say, the impact it has on the performance is the highest in terms of the cost, because you're not going to spend too much money on premium DNS with the solutions I'm going to mention, but you're going to get a lot of performance boost, and the latency that you're going to get is going to be reduced by a lot. So that is one of the toughest things to do in website optimization. As we were just beginning the webinar, we already had a comment coming up that, okay, how do I reduce server time? This is one of the things to reduce server time, because if the DNS parsing is taking too long, then the server can't respond in time, even if it's ready. So this is one of the things that you should be looking at. I don't remember the name of the person who left that comment, but this is one of the answers that you should be looking at. And of course, the second answer would be to have a great host that the servers are themselves good, that they respond in time. Okay. So the DNS that we prefer, Cloudflare also has a DNS, and you can also use Google domains. For people who don't know, Google also is a domain registrar. For example, if you go to Hostinger, maybe tons of other domain registration websites, and you purchase a domain, you can do that on actually Google as well. And we've done a video on our website or on our channel, Brainstorm Force, discussing why Google domains is a fantastic choice if you're just buying domains, because a lot of advantages. You don't pay too much money. Maybe it's slightly expensive than maybe what deal you will find online if you were looking for the cheapest deal, but they don't raise the prices year on year. So no matter if you're buying domains for 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, the price remains the same. They don't oversell or upsell you on anything, and there are a lot of benefits in general. And the best important part is, when you use Google domains, you get their premium DNS service as well. So your domain will be very, very fast performing. This is very important. And Cloudflare, as I mentioned, it's a CDN, but it also does DNS, premium DNS for you. And they have a free tier, they have a premium tier as well. So make sure to check out both of them. And I think no matter if you have already registered a domain on a provider and you're not happy, or you want to improve the performance even further, you can just transfer the name server over to Cloudflare and they'll take care of the rest, or you can transfer the entire domain to Google domains. Both are possible. So these are important solutions to look for when you're actually looking at squeezing out every bit of performance off-site with off-site improvements. All right. So those were the majority of the things that I talked about off-site improvements. And I hope I'm making sense. If I'm making sense, just make sure that you leave some, okay, maybe leave, I'm enjoying this, I like it, or you're doing good in the comments, so that I at least know, because I can't see how you guys are. You can see me. So if I'm doing a good job, make sure to leave some encouragement or at least an acknowledgement in the comments that maybe you're understanding the whatever concepts I'm explaining and the improvements I'm explaining. Okay. So coming to on-site improvements. Now, obviously, these are improvements that you make on your website. It's important to understand that. Coming to, again, these improvements, we've talked about a lot of these things already, but now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail, specifically about the theme. I already mentioned why a high-performance theme is important. So you already understand the benefits, and you should check out a theme that has a great future as well. For example, if you start using a free theme, maybe they're good, they look amazing, but maybe the developer like discontinues support for it over time. So then what happens is, even if the theme is good, you have to pay and change your entire website. So a lot of people think that, okay, you can change themes at any time. That's usually a curse. So theme that you're going to stick with it for a long time and has great support. So I'm a little bit biased, but Astra has great support. Even for free users, we provide support. So make sure to check out Astra. And questions about theme itself, any kind of themes or optimized themes, make sure to leave it in the comments. Yeah, I've already mentioned Astra. So moving on. As these are things I've already mentioned, that Astra is one of the most popular themes. If you go into the popular tab on your website and you try to look for a theme, you'll mostly find Astra there. It's usually in the most popular themes, and the themes that you see on the left are actually WordPress default themes. So technically, Astra is the most popular theme currently. Okay. Now caching. Now I've just touched on caching a bit now, but I'm not now talk about what caching is. A lot of if you are experienced a user, then you already know what caching is. But this entire webinar is for beginners, so I'm not talking about caching in a little bit more detail. Caching, right? So let me ask you a question. All the viewers who are watching this, what is 77 by 116? No calculators, no phones. Do everything in your head. All right. I have 5 seconds to answer the question. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. The answer is actually 8584. I am not sure how many of you got them right, but I wouldn't have gotten it right in 5 seconds. Right. Now, let me ask you another question. Okay. So prepare yourself. Now I'm giving you a heads up that I'm going to ask you another question. The question is, what's 77 by 116? Now, I'm sure a lot of you now already know the answer, right? The answer is the same. Why? Because I just gave you the answer.
Remember.
And your brain. So your brain cached the answer. You have to fix your brain caching. All right. So your answer is cached in your brain. So this is a pretty simple example to understand, but in caching in terms of website is what happens is, whenever a user tries to access a website, a lot of things happen, right? So after DNS and everything, I'm talking about what happens on your server. So your server has to go to your database to fetch some files and execute PHP code and even like fetch CSS files, bring it all together, fetch the images, external resources. And then after doing all that, it has to construct the page, right? It's a lot of effort for every visitor that your server has to do. Now, but just think of it for a second. If the page does not change over time, maybe the page does not change for a month, does it make sense for the server to do this again and again for every user if the page does not change? The point I'm trying to make is that once the website or once your server actually spends all the resources collecting everything together and build page, same page, it can just serve that copy or the final output of the page to every visitor that comes. It will save a bunch of resources, right? Makes all the sense in the world. And that exactly is what caching is. Whatever content you have on your website, your server can just prepare a copy in advance and then serve it to users. And saves a bunch of time. Technically, CDNs also do the same thing, but they take caching to a next level because they'll cache your content throughout the entire world through their servers. But this is why caching is important. A basic, I don't have the exact numbers, but if you enable caching, you can instantly start serving 3 or 4x more users on your website with the same resources. That's how powerful caching is, right? Just enable caching, set it up, and then you can have very high performance and you can start serving more users. Now, little bit of disclaimer with caching. Now, caching, I've mentioned it's very simple, or I've explained it in a very simple manner, but caching is usually a tad bit more complicated to set up on your website, right? And it totally depends on the kind of website, because there's a lot of considerations to be taken place. Depends on how much dynamic content you have, and a lot of different variety of cachings are available. You have memcache, you have OP cache, you have database cached, and then tons of caching options. So if I start going into details right now on how to set up caching, that's going to be a lot of problem, because if I give a specific advice, it might work for someone, but it might break someone else's website. So I can't go into that without being irresponsible. So I'm going to end the caching part right now, but I hope you understand why caching is important. And we're also going to recommend a couple of products that you can use on your website to set up caching. Moving on to the next step. So for caching or setting up caching, you have a bunch of plugins out there. Again, if you make a search, you'll find at least 20 different plugins. But the ones that we personally used and we recommend, for W3 Total Cache that you see on the screen, is a free caching plugin. It's been around for the longest time and it has amazing results. So it just takes a little bit of time to set up, but it will give you some excellent results. Cloudflare again. So as I mentioned, Cloudflare is a premium DNS provider, and it's also CDN. So when you use them as a CDN, they can also cache your data. So for example, your they can come on their servers, and technically they serve as a caching unit or as also as a CDN for them. So that's why you'll see the name Cloudflare appear in a lot of times. Next is WP Rocket, and WP is also a fantastic plugin. It's a premium plugin for WordPress. I don't remember the exact pricing, but it has some amazing performance boosts for websites that we've tested it on, and it's pretty amazing. So check it out. And also NitroPack is a fairly new say offering, but it also has delivered some great results. So if you don't know what caching is, if you have not implemented caching, or you're starting a website and you want to implement caching, at least start with Cloudflare and W3 Total Cache, which you can see on the screen. And then if you do believe, or you do your own research and you figure out, okay, WP Rocket might be a good investment to make. It's not very expensive, maybe less than $70 or something for a year. Then go ahead and make that call and purchase. And they have great return policies as well. So don't worry about if you don't like it, you can get a refund. But they're highly recommended services that you should definitely check out. All right, moving on. Optimize your images. So as I said, images make up usually the largest part of your page. If you have the ability, or if you have the technical skills to actually check out a page, the text part and the theme portion usually is less than 50 KB, or maybe at most 100 KB. But images, no matter even if you have a 1000 pixel wide image, it's going to be usually 120, 140, or at least 70, 80 kilobytes. So just one image compared to the entirety of a page, sometimes the image is much bigger than the page itself. So you can understand the impact it has, how many bytes you need to send across to just load an image. So if you didn't have the image, the user experience will suffer. As we mentioned, experience is more important than speed. But if you can't have so many images, or images that are not optimized, dragging down your page. So you have to find a balance between where images add value to the page and also don't bog down your performance. So that's what we're going to talk about, how to optimize images. So images, usually three different options talk about. We talk about resizing, we talk about compression, and we talk about image format. We're going to talk about all three in a quick explanation. So this is what is meant by resizing images. What you do is take an image, you resize the image and reduce the number of pixels, and that reduces the size of the image as well, right? For example, if you're downloading images from a free website, for example, unsplash.com is pretty popular. They will usually give you images that have 5,000 pixels in width. And most websites don't need that. Most websites are more than 1300 pixel wide is more than enough, unless you are aiming to appear on 4K TVs. It's more than enough. And there are plenty of ways to find out what the maximum width your theme supports. Even if you take into account retina devices, just double that size and you're good to go. So whenever you download images, make a conscious decision, or make how big this image is, and make it small or reduce the size as much as possible. And my personal recommendation is to do it before you upload it to the website, because obviously you have options to resize images on WordPress itself, on your server. And all the tools that you will use, or I'll recommend, will also do a good job in resizing images on your website. But that has a big catch. If the plugin or whatever you use resizes images on your server, then it'll take up your resources, right? And then those resources could be spent serving users. And if your plugin or the service that you're going to use is going to resize your images remotely, that means sending the images to their servers, resizing and bringing back, that's going to consume bandwidth. And most of these plugins that provide this service, remote optimization, are not free. So you're using a quota that you could have just saved by resizing images on your computer as well. There are plenty of tools out there. You have plenty of free services out there as well. One tool that I know of, and I personally use, is XN Convert. It's a fantastic plugin or fantastic app application available for Mac, Windows, and you can do a bunch of optimization in it and resize images to any pixel size you want. This is one important thing. Second is compressing your image. So compression is a little bit hard to explain, but think of it as a sponge. You have a sponge, you compress it. So technically the weight of the image remains the same, but now it's smaller. It takes up less space. This is similar to what compression happens. So compression is usually also mentioned as the quality of the image or quality score or compression percentage. So when you're looking at JPG image, you will have quality score, how much you can compress the image. So the pixels in the image will not go away, but some of the color information is taken away, maybe the EXIF data is removed. So compression takes away some of the data and reduces the size of the image, while the actual pixels, physical pixels, remain the same. So first step would be to compress your images, then you would need to compress your image as well. All right, these are two important things. The next part is image format. So for people who are familiar with images, you know the popular image formats are JPG, PNG, maybe TIFF, and GIF also, GIF, whatever you like to call it. And then you have some other formats like JP2 is also somewhere is popular. But these are not optimized for the web, right? On the web, you have a limited time and resources are scarce. Even if it's a few kilobytes of saving, just multiply it over millions of visitors that can come to your website or will come to your website over the period of maybe a month or years, depending on the traffic. And that just goes to show that every byte that you can save in bandwidth is going to affect your website for the near future or for the future. So image formats, the newer image formats that Google and some other companies have come up with, they're usually called next gen image formats. So there are, I think, 3 or 4 of them, but the most popular one that you can see screen right there on the bottom right is WebP. So WebP is actually the image format that is designed for the web. It's backed by Google, and this is the format that you should be using on your website. Now, if you want to check out how WebP appears, just go to, if you have an Android phone, go to the Google Play Store, and whenever you see the icons for the apps themselves, if you actually are able to save that icons, you'll notice that they are in WebP format. They're not in JPG or PNG, and WebP also supports transparency. So even if you have transparent images, then or logos on your website, then WebP is a fantastic format to use. So my question is that, okay, how do you take JPG images and convert them to WebP images? Because compression and resizing is not the most difficult thing in the world, but WebP, some people are maybe not aware about how to do it. So you can just Google the term where JPG to WebP conversion, and you'll find plenty of like online services. But I wouldn't recommend that you use those services to do it. Technically, the software that I mentioned, Extend Convert, also can convert all your images and even thousands of images to WebP. But that just leaves something on the table. WebP is relatively new compared to JPG and other image formats, right? Relatively new. So it has around 92% browser coverage. So 92%, approximately 92% of your users will have support, or their browsers will have support for WebP images. The rest of them will not have support. So the problem is, if you just take or convert your images to WebP and just upload them, then what will happen is they won't be able to see your image itself, right? So those users, even 8%, maybe you think it's a small number, but 8%, just think of it, 8% of revenue gone overnight. Would you like it? No. So that's why it's important to have a service that has a fallback option, right? For example, I'm going to recommend a plugin which does resizing, compression, and conversion. And what it does is it detects if the user's browser has support for WebP. And if it does, it will serve the WebP image. If it does not, it will fall back on maybe JPG or the PNG or the original image format. So it gives you best of both worlds, and it does all of this automatically. So you don't have to make a conscious effort of converting images to WebP and then uploading it. Just take an image, upload it, preferably resize it before uploading, and it'll compress it to your levels or your liking, and also will convert it to WebP format and serve the users with WebP if they support it. So this is the thing that you should be aware of. Coming to the actual product recommendations themselves, yeah, one more important thing. Please, if you are uploading or if you're taking videos and you want to upload them on your website, don't upload it directly. Don't upload, just take an audio file or a video file and upload it to your server. That's most of the time against the terms of service for most hosts, right? Because it takes a lot of bandwidth, and most hosts are not even optimized for video hosting, because they are trying to serve users, not watchers. Not best, but I hope you understand that. So what you should do is, if you have audio and video, if you want to upload it, or you want to have users watching videos on your website or even listening to audio content, use an external service and embed it. For example, SoundCloud is a great way to just have audio on your website, and YouTube, maybe Vimeo, and there are tons of others will not consume your website. So video and to so your around, even if so. I don't achieve and
All right.
plugins do compress
It seems like we're having some technical
these.
difficulties. Yuvraj, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you're back. All right.
Yeah. Sorry. What did I miss? When did I offline?
Like the previous slide, we lost you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, this one or this one?
You were talking about not uploading like audio, videos to your WordPress website.
So I webinar, but I'm just emphasize so audio and your server is going to have a hard time serving those visitors, or in server hosting different. So
All right, it seems we lost our genius guy. All right, just a second. I'm gonna try to contact him, and maybe he will be able to join us. So here, like Yurash, he was having some troubles. Oh, he's back.
all right.
All right, finally you're back.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
so sorry about this. I'm having internet issues today.
Oh,
Right. So I'm not going to repeat all this. Okay. All right. I think
it seems
you
like
get the
the
point.
slide is cursed. I think the slide.
I'll just move on quickly. Right. So how to achieve all this? How to have small images and high performance images on your sites, right? So we did a study in 2020, and we compared all the different image compression and optimization plugins, and we compared Smush, Optimal, Short Pixel, EWW, and all maybe a few others as well. And we found Imagify produced the best results. So from what you can see on the screen right here, we tested 200 KB images, and then Imagify was the one that produced the smallest image for the best quality or similar quality to everything else. So almost a 70% reduction in compression. So this was not even resized because the exact images were used. So Imagify is fantastic. We recommend it. It is freemium, and I think you get maybe I don't remember the exact thing, but you have a fairly decent free quota that you can use to start compressing an images. And WebP conversion on Imagify is completely free. So if you have already optimized images and you just want a solution to convert those to WebP, then Imagify also is a great solution. So I would highly recommend that you check out Imagify. I'll leave a link down in the description after the webinar ends. All right. Coming to the next point, optimizing your database. So as I mentioned earlier, database, just imagine your room, right? So what you can see right here behind me is pretty well organized, but what you don't see is not very well organized, right? So if I want to find something and look at something that I'm looking for, I'm going to have a hard time finding it unless I already remember. And my wife will make sure that I don't find anything in the place that I left it, because she'll organize a lot of things when I'm gone. So the point is, you need to optimize your database, because everything you have on your website, your images, the links to the images, the content, the text, the code is actually stored in the database. And I'm going to share a personal story when we talk about some specific. So it's not something that you should be over optimizing, or you have to be on top of your database, but over time it'll happen that your website or your database will become a little bit locked up. So you have to clean it and optimize it over time. So what things that are in the database that can be cleaned? Well, you have like extra comments, like comments you have deleted, they're still in the database. You have stale data, you have old blog posts that are drafted, and then if you have enabled pingbacks, trackbacks, and then you have expired transient options, which I'm going to mention. And you also have post revisions. So every time you make any changes to the post, WordPress saves everything unless you limit it. So if you make one change to a post for 30 days, WordPress will save 30 different revisions of that page or post, and it's going to just consume resources unless you intend to go back to the first version or any of the versions that you decide. So you can limit those number of revisions, that maybe 3 or 5, and then you can also compact and defragment your MySQL tables, which just means organizing the content um, better, so it's easier to find. And as I said, remove post revisions. So as I was saying, I would share a personal story that not my first website, that one of the websites that I built was an e-commerce website. I was just testing something out, and I uploaded thousands of products on it. And over time, I didn't optimize the database. And I noticed something, that once I just tried to log in on my website on a random day, I couldn't even get in. I reached the admin page, and I just entered my credentials, and the admin page took 4 minutes to load. That much time it was taking to load. And if I went to any other option, the website would just give out, and maybe it took 5 minutes, and I was getting timeout issues. I would getting tons of issues, and the front end was no different. It was also having performance issues, and I couldn't diagnose what the problem was. So after maybe 3 or 4 days of hard work, I figured out that the transient options were not cleaned up. And technically WordPress take care of them automatically, but I made some changes which made it so that transients were not cleared automatically. So transient is just temporary data that WordPress uses to serve users. So once I cleared that, my website went from like 4 minutes of load time to 3 seconds. So what happens is, most of the time, or many times, you will not notice such a big improvement, but you don't know unless you do it. So if you're never optimizing a database, you don't know how much cloud it is or how much improvements it's going to bring. So maybe you can have an optimization for a database once every couple of months, or maybe once a quarter, whatever you see fit. And once you do it a couple of times, you're going to understand, or depending on the tech stack you have, depending on the kind of plugins you have, how much optimization your database needs over time, right? So again, coming to the most important point, how to achieve this. Most people, even including me, are not efficient and going to my like SQL database and optimizing things and cleaning up, because it's going to likely, I'm going to mess up. So I'm going to again recommend, with WordPress, plugins are fantastic. So I recommend 2 different plugins for you. The one is WP Optimize. It's a fantastic plugin. It will optimize your database. And the second one is Advanced Database Cleaner. Both kind of do the same thing, but there are some different options, some scheduling options, something else. But both of them, once you start them, they'll take care, or they'll tell you what they're going to do. So you can configure the number of post revisions. You can have how many things. We can disable pingbacks and trackbacks and all the things. Just have to configure them, and everything I mentioned is not very complicated setup. Just go and change some settings, optimize, and then it will be taken care of. And one of these plugins also supports some scheduling options, so you can set it up so that the optimizations take care of themselves, maybe every week or 15 days or whatever you want to set it up. So there, it's very easy to do. And what you can do is, if you don't want one more plugin, some people are very scared of adding, I don't want to add one more plugin to my website, then what you can do is just do the optimization, disable the plugin if you don't, or even delete it if you would like to. Just install the plugin once again when you are ready to do this optimization again. All right, so that takes care of the database optimization. Next point, other miscellaneous tips, because these are now we covered maybe not too many points in the on-site optimization, but if you just take care of these things, your website is going to see massive performance improvements. And not only, maybe your website will not start loading in like 1/10 of the time, but even if it has maybe double the performance, you will be able to serve more concurrent visitors. That is also a big thing, because a lot of people, as I said, user experience is important. If you can serve one visitor very quickly, but if your second visitor arrives and your website cannot handle it, it's not a great experience for the second user. But if your website is performing maybe okayish or decent or maybe nice, and then you can serve maybe 50 visitors at once, that is much better for you. So don't look at the absolute number, also look at how many visitors it can serve, how quickly you can take care of those tasks. So these are important. So we're almost at the end of this. I've collected a bunch of miscellaneous tips that I wanted to talk about, which did not fit into the flow of the video, or maybe I did not have a lot of technical details to mention. So I'm going to just run through them one by one so that I don't ignore them. So first is enable lazy loading. Lazy loading is very simple to understand. Maybe let's assume that you have a long page with maybe 10 images. And what usually happens if you don't have lazy loading is that entire page is loaded at once. So if the user is just reading this portion of the page, the entirety of this page is also loaded at once. So what you want to do is, if you have a page with 10 images, you want to make sure that the entire page is loaded at once. So what you can do is,
Yuraj, It seems like we lost him again. Oh, he's coming back.
I'm sorry, when did I lose everybody?
Oh, I forgot. I got so stressed, after losing you.
Was I on this slide? So I'll just start from the beginning for this slide.
I guess you were talking about lazy loading.
Lazy.
You were
All
about
right.
to finish it.
Okay. So I'll just quickly run down once again if you missed some of the points. Lazy loading, you have a large page. It has a bunch of content, text, and multiple images. So if you're starting from this section, usually if there is no lazy loading, then everything on the page will be loaded at once. So you are spending resources on loading images that user is not able to see yet. So it's not efficient, right? It takes a bunch of time. If you enable lazy loading, then what will happen is only when the user starts scrolling down, when it's reaching that image part, only then those resources will be loaded. So it's a much more efficient way of utilizing resources on your server, right? So lazy loading, I believe it's already part of WordPress now, because it was earlier you had to use plugins to do it, but now I think WordPress natively supports it. So you just have to enable it in the settings, or you can use external plugins because they have some additional options. You can set up some additional options, so you can use that. And lazy, if you have large pages on a website, or especially if you use a lot of images on each of your pages, this will be very, very important for you, and this in alone can mean a world of a difference in terms of optimization. All right. Second is split a long post. This is similar to the first time, but first tip. But what you can do is, if you have a long page, sometimes you'll have ultimate guides, or maybe something very, very technical, or which goes for maybe 10,000 words, 20,000 words. So again, if you have everything on the same page, it has to be loaded together, except with lazy loading. What you can do is, because a user is not going to read all the content on the page at once, right? So what you can do is just enable some chunks. You can create a divide that one page into multiple pages and create multiple pages. And WordPress supports this. You just have to add the next page tag, and WordPress will automatically take care of it, and it will be divided. And then only a small chunk of the page will be loaded at once. So obviously it will save some resources, right? Next is one of the most important parts, but I did not include it in the section where it should have been, because then again we would have to go into a lot of detail about uh, the hosting environment and everything. But it's very important that you choose a host that has the latest version of stable PHP version. Right? Currently PHP 8 is out, but I don't think it's very stable and it's compatible with WordPress well. So PHP makes a world of a difference. For people who don't know, WordPress is coded in PHP. Everything that happens on the website is or the code of the website is written in PHP. The faster the PHP executes, the less time it takes for the website to load. As I said, everything happens in conjunction, so one step at a time. So if any of the steps that it takes to load a page take a long time, the entirety of the page will take a long time. So you have to optimize each step of the way. So this is one of the important things, and you should talk to your host about this. And whenever you're considering a host, talk to them about, okay, what PHP version do you support, and PHP 7 plus something at least they should support, and you should be using that specifically, at least 7. And when 8 becomes more stable with WordPress, you should maybe switch to 8 as well. Then next is disable hot linking. Now, hot linking, this most of the people don't need to worry about hot linking, but for the people, sometimes you might have bad luck and this might happen to you. Hot linking, what it does, if you remember, or if you know, that everything you have, suppose you have an image on your website, technically you can access that image with a URL. If you go to any of the website, or your website, any other website pages, and just right click on a computer and look at open image in new tabs, the image specifically will have a URL, right? And now if hot linking is not or hot linking is enabled, it's right, what will happen if hot linking is enabled? Any user can come to your website, copy the URL of your images, go to their websites, and just add that URL as an image on their website. Now the significance is that when they have content loading on their website, the image is still loading from your website, right? Because they have added the URL to your image. So suppose you have an image and it's used by some major publication that has 50,000 visitors a day. So you have no visitors, but once somebody uses your images, you are serving 50,000 visitors for your image. You're wasting bandwidth and server resources. So it's kind of digital stealing, maybe borrowing is the right word. So that's why you should disable hot linking to save resources. Again, it doesn't happen to everyone, but it can happen to you. And there are pretty, if you just Google you'll find one of the articles on how it happened to one of the big publications, the Oatmeal, and one of their images were hot linked by major publications. It was very funny. Next is use of firewall. Now, firewall is like antivirus software for maybe your website, and it's actually a security tip. But the reason I'm mentioning it in the optimization part is because if you have, maybe suppose your website is some hackers are trying to attempt to hack your website, so they'll send a lot of traffic. They'll try to log into your website. Maybe I send 50 bots trying to access the website, trying to access a lot of pages on your website. So if you don't have a firewall, if you don't have a way to just like take care of them at the server level, or just not letting them access your website, what will happen is your server will spend a lot of resources just trying to serve those visitors. Even if they can't log in, even if they are not able to get into your website, your server still has to serve them, right? So if you disable or if you enable a firewall, then those visitors may be rate limited. Maybe you'll have a limit to how many password attempts they can have. So they will use less of your resources. And obviously those resources can be spent on serving actual visitors instead of potential malicious users. All right. Next point is decrease server resources. Again, this is a little bit more technical. I'll just explain what it means. So whenever a page is loaded on your website, a lot of server requests are made. As I said, maybe a JavaScript file is loaded, maybe icon file is loaded, maybe some CSS is loaded, maybe jQuery is loaded, some from some CDN, and maybe you have some other emojis, custom emojis that you have done. So every server resource that goes out takes time to go out, execute, or whatever data is fetched, and come back. So that elongates the entire process of loading your website. So what you should do is try to reduce that request. So if, as I mentioned in a previous example, if you have, suppose, Google Analytics on your website and it's taking a long time to load, you can maybe try to host it locally. Same with font files. If you're using remote fonts, then you can just keep them on your server. Or if it's not really necessary, just disable the functionality altogether. For example, I've seen a lot of people, what they do is just disable the emojis support because they don't use emojis, and that just reduces the server load time a little bit. So try to optimize it without affecting your user experience. For example, if you have a meme website, then you can't really disable emojis. You will have to have emojis, but I hope you get the point on how to understand or how to reduce server requests. Next point is disable pingbacks and trackbacks. So pingbacks, trackbacks, in the simplest of words, it's a technology or a feature that WordPress had, that whenever you linked to a website, another WordPress website, so WordPress internally had a way of notifying them that, all right, I linked to you. And it's not used as it was used back in the day. So you can just disable this feature altogether. It just saves a bunch of resources, because every time I think you update your page and it goes to RSS, then it takes resources for the pingbacks and trackbacks to happen. So it's not really necessary. The next point is deleting images that you don't use. This is also something that you'll see varied results with. I can't guarantee that if you delete images, you will see performance improvement. But if you have a lot of images which you don't use, maybe you deleted a lot of pages that are a lot of content. So what you should do is just go back and delete the images that you don't use. And in WordPress, what you can do is, there's in the media gallery, there's an option. You can search for unattached images. And what that means is every image that is not attached to a page or post, you can find them instantly. And then just make a call whether you want to keep them on your server. And just if you don't, then it's wise to delete them. And again, minimizing number of ads. I've already mentioned and covered this multiple times already, why this is important for user experience. And that's it, guys. I think we covered a lot of information. I've been speaking for a very long time. And I hope the information that I presented was easy to understand. That was the first goal, that a lot of beginners, when even I was starting out, it was very tough to get some of the concepts of why we are doing some things and why somebody is recommending this. So I wanted to give you more mindset approach rather than give you technical things. Okay, just check this box and check this box. And I hope that was useful to you as well. And I hope you have a better understanding of, when you go out and actually search for solutions, then you understand what you should look for. All right. I hope that makes sense to all the users. I don't know how many of you watching, but any of you watching, if you like this, I would appreciate a thumbs up on this video. And of course, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them, and we can move on to the questions right now.
Thank you, Raj. That was an amazing presentation. You had so well covered everything. Like fascinating, man. Amazing. Now what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back home and I'm gonna optimize my website to load like a flash.
Right.
All right. So I loved your examples. Really, really interesting. Very amazing. You did an outstanding job. I saw a lot of
Thank you.
comments that you are wonderful.
Thank you. Are there any
All right.
important questions that we can answer?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to Q&A session.
All right.
And let's start with the very first question. I'm going to
Mhm.
display it on the screen. And MD guy, I don't want to butcher his title,
All
but
right.
he says, please tell something about how to reduce server response time. I have a WordPress site hosted on Hostinger whose server response time is more than 1.3 seconds.
That's completely our department. But as I mentioned, a couple of things I already answered. That just look at your DNS, because if your domain name is hosted on some other domain provider, then that might be one of the issues. And of course, get in touch with support if your server is not optimized. And one more thing, I would like to set some realistic expectations. That some people I've seen in some Facebook groups and forums, that what they do is just they want to have the cheapest server possible, maybe spend two couple of dollars a month, but they want to load it with like a 18-wheeler truck load of resources or visitors, and then expect, okay, I'm facing slowdowns. Obviously, you're going to face slowdowns. You have to have realistic expectations on what your server can do. So if you've done everything, if you've optimized everything, every suggestion, if you talk to support, make sure everything is in place, and you still uh, do not have great performance, then maybe check your server's resources. Right? If it's peaking at 90% all the time, then your server is not able to keep up with the load. So make sure to get a bigger server or a better server, managed hosting, or even in caching, you can have a lot of complex caching setups depending on what your environment is. For example, if you have an Nginx server, you can have varnish cache, which is a reverse proxy caching. And it depends. The answer is not very simple, but you have to try out all the things to understand where the problem is, because without looking at the tech stack extensively, it's very hard to give a specific answer on what is the issue, right? I
Perfect,
hope that
perfect
answers
answer.
his question.
Yeah, totally perfect.
All
All
right.
right, so let's move on to the next question. And the next
Mhm.
question comes from the same person. My second question is, do I need any other plugins for WordPress optimization, such as cache, image, etc., besides
All right.
Lightspeed and Cloudflare? If so, which one would be better to use?
This is again an interesting question, because it's a little more technical, and it's very dependent on your tech stack. And even in caching plugins, right? You have WP Rocket, you have Lightspeed Cache. This is technically a performance optimization, but the point I'm trying to make is, it does not matter what plugin you use. Sometimes it's how you configure the plugin itself. For example, you have W3 Total Cache. It has a bunch of options. It has Redis cache, it has Memcache, it has object cache, it has database cache, and everything you can customize how the caching actually takes place. Some variables you can customize. So it is entirely possible you to understand your website completely and optimize W3 Total Cache, or use W3 Total Cache and optimize caching much better, even compared to a premium plugin. So again, this is totally dependent on your server and your website, and that's why I entirely did not cover a lot of technical details in the webinar, because it very much depends on the server, depends on your content. If you have WooCommerce, the recommendation is completely different. If you have a static page, the recommendation is completely different. So you have to figure that out, and ultimately, if your website is loading in a couple of seconds, it's good enough. That's the first thing I will establish. It's not bad, it's good enough. And specifically, one number that I like to mention, I think I might be wrong on this, the LCP number that we were talking about, the largest contentful paint on the website. I think Google's recommendations right now is under 2.5 seconds. So if your majority of your page is loading in 2.5 seconds, you're already good enough. Don't spend more time in optimizing your website unless it has business direct impact on your bottom line. Do something else. Get more customers, gain more traffic, get more links. Do something else. That's the most important recommendation.
Yeah, yeah, completely. Don't over focus on the load speed. There
Right.
are other
Don't be obsessed
important
with it.
things
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I
Right.
used to be one of these guys as well.
Yeah, I've done it myself.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. All right, let's move on to another question.
Right.
So here's another question. Please give us some suggestion to improve TTFB.
Again, TTFB, time to first byte, as I mentioned, your host, I don't know what hosting you're using, and your DNS. These are the most important thing, and the server itself. For example, if you are on a shared hosting environment, then without even I'll say, not to blame the hosts, but shared hosting is not optimized for performance as much as you would get in a managed hosting, right? Shared hosting is for people who just want, for example, you have a local business website, you just have maybe 20 visitors a day. Shared hosting is for personal blogs, for those kind of websites, maybe a small website. It's not really optimized for performance because it's the cheapest option out there usually. So if you have, again, you're trying to generate revenue directly from a website, e-commerce, selling digital products, maybe an affiliate website, then don't go for shared hosting, or at least try to figure out if shared hosting will be sufficient for your traffic. So you technically can't reduce TTFB without changing your host or changing your DNS. But if you choose the wrong host, or if you have a really bad domain provider, then there's nothing I can do. Just go. You have to go and change it out.
Yeah, totally. I remember when I had my website, WooCommerce store, and back in the day, I wasn't keen on spending money, and I chose the cheapest shared web hosting plan.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It happens.
yes.
I have probably done it myself. The first host I had, I paid, I think I paid around $10 for the entire year on shared hosting. I didn't
Yeah,
complain about performance. I didn't complain about performance. I was happy that I
yeah.
was getting the cheapest option. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I remember I started getting more and more traffic, and my website would start to crash, and I was like, "What's
Right.
going on?" Paying $10 per year.
Exactly. So just
All
this,
right,
you have to have realistic expectations. That's what I was trying to say.
all right. Let's move on to another question. So I guess conversion rate improvement. So we already touched that. I guess if you want to improve your conversion rate,
Maybe
you
show the
must have. I'm gonna show this
yeah.
question right here. So you should have like
Conversion rate. Yeah.
fast loading website.
Right.
That's
And
exactly why
conversion
we are
rate
here.
depends. Yeah. Speed is just one part of CRO in general, because it depends on the website, your trust factors, how optimize your form checkouts and everything is. So speed is just a small improvement. And usually I would say it's at least third or fourth on my list of when I'm talking about CRO. So if you have great CRO, you need to have trust in your website, trust in the person who owns the website. So you, and then maybe the content on the website, and then the speed. Right.
Yeah,
So
there are
that's
other
yeah.
factors like social media presence,
Right.
so you
So
would look
it ties in with the
trustworthy.
trust
Yeah,
factor. Right.
yeah, there are
So
trust factor. Yeah, exactly. All right,
right.
let's move on to another question. How
Okay.
can we reduce initial server response time?
I'm seeing a pattern here. Okay. So and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. This is again the same question which I've already answered, but again re-emphasizing that first of all, check if the overall load time, or if you are not failing on CWE, don't worry about it. If you have not the best server response time, but if you are passing all checks in CWE, you're good to go. Don't worry about it. And if later in the day you have the time and the resources and you want to actually improve the speed, just get a better host and DNS. That's the only, or better host. I mean, just get a better offering from your host, right? Because as I said, shared hosting, you don't expect the best performance because it's not designed for the best performance. So don't expect that, okay, your server response time would be maybe 20 milliseconds when you're paying $5 a month for hosting. Those are websites that are hosted on maybe $1,000 a month or even more costlier environments. Just giving an example, you all know WordPress, right? WordPress has a WordPress VIP offering, which is a hosted solution for big publishers. And the pricing starts at $2,000 a month. It starts at $2,000 a month. And that is where they'll offer their best of the best solution. So if you want the best from a host, you have to pay for the best, right? You can't get a cheap car and then expect it to do 300 miles an hour, right? You have to get a Bugatti for that. So you have to pay for it.
All right, fantastic. All right, so the next question is right here. If picture uploaded, it shows website insecure. It's
Okay.
a little bit different question than I
Yeah.
expected, but I guess you should
Maybe
use.
from the question, I think maybe your HTTPS migration has not done it's not done properly, because maybe your website, your image URLs are still on HTTP, and that's why you're loading an image and it's trying to access HTTP URLs maybe. So maybe check if that's in place or redirections are properly set in place.
maybe simple SSL plugin
Yeah,
could
yeah.
help us to
Yeah, I
solve
think
this.
the new version of WordPress is going to take care of SSL migrations itself, right? They're going to do everything by itself. You don't need a plugin. I think so. That it's going to
Finally.
come in 5.7, right? Yeah, it's been waiting for a long time for that.
Yeah. All
I
right.
hope
So
we answered that question. If you didn't get if you that was not the question, then just like write a question. I was specific, so I can answer it in a different manner.
all right. Just a second. We have a question for me, I guess.
All right.
Maybe you have something to add up. I have your
Mhm.
premium plan. If I update more than one plugin at a time, the website goes into maintenance mode for hours. How can I reduce resources to have the site update plugins without problems? All right. I guess
Do you have something to add?
uh, I'm not sure. It's like when you're updating plugins, try to update them one by one and see if
Yeah, that's
there
the
you
first
have this.
recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, if you still have this issue,
Mhm.
and check how many resources you are consuming.
Right.
Maybe your plan isn't powerful enough for you.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'll go more specific and give you an answer. So your server has limited resources, right? For example, if I have my computer right here, I'm working on it. It has some CPU usage already. I'm using a certain set of CPU. But if my CPU usage is about 90-95%, then anything I'm going to do additionally is going to take 10 times longer than it usually does. So if your server is already under a lot of load, then anytime you do anything, maybe even a plugin load or plugin update, is going to take a long time. And usually websites don't get stuck in maintenance for us. What happens is whenever you update a plugin, WordPress just notifies that, okay, we are in maintenance. And if something goes wrong, even if that does not affect your website, maintenance mode usually does not, I would say, get disabled automatically if there's a conflict. So usually it's a .maintenance file in the root of your server, and many times it's not the problem that something is still going on or update is still in progress. It's just that because you updated maybe multiple plugins at the same time, or you opened them in side by side tabs and updated each of them simultaneously, then WordPress does not know that, okay, we have done the process, because they usually plugins update is recommended to be updated linearly. So make sure first check the amount of resources your server is using, and if it's not using a lot, even then just update the plugins one by one. Second would be to check if maintenance is actually doing something, or it's just notifying that, okay, a website is under maintenance. Because many times if you make a Google search how to disable maintenance mode, the solution is pretty simple. Just go into your cPanel and just delete the maintenance file, and usually that fixes the problem. So it, depending on the problem you have, it might be one of the solutions. So just don't do that or make multiple plugins at the same time. Just see if that's an issue.
Perfect. All right. Let's move on to another one.
Right.
All right. What is the fastest WordPress theme on the market today, Astra?
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of sneak peek. Astra, if you know already, it's the current version is 3.3.2, I believe, and we're working on a 3.4 version. So not going to give any specifics, but we are focusing. The entire update is about performance, and if not the fastest, we're going to be mostly we are going to be the fastest out there. And we're going to do some lot of content around it. So we're going to have a blog post comparing other themes with specific numbers. So just wait for the update. It should be, don't quote me on that, should be released by the end of the month, or maybe in a couple of weeks later. So just wait for that, and you'll see Astra is pretty high performance website already. But if you want to see how we can take it even further, then just wait for 3.4 update.
All right. Amazing. I guess the theme, the one it says on your T-shirt, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The
That's one.
fast. All right, let's move on to another one.
All right.
Even if the plugin is inactive, does updating it make difference?
So I'm not a big expert in WordPress code, but I assume that it does not, because based on my understanding of how it works, if you have a plugin that's disabled, it does not affect your load times at all. It's just taking some space in your database, but it's not affecting the code of your website. That's my understanding.
Yeah. If you are not using that plugin, you can delete it.
Right.
Why waste your space? All right,
Right.
let's move on to another one.
Okay.
Just a second. All right, this one. How can we detect an optimized plugin?
Okay, so as I mentioned, what I mentioned in the video, the webinar itself, I've not kept up to date with this part of the problem. But earlier, maybe a couple of years ago, there was a plugin called P3 Performance Optimization, which actually did this process. What it did, if you install that plugin, you loaded your website or web pages internally, even in the admin area, it would tell you the exact amount of time each plugin was taking. And for developers, there's a plugin called Query Monitor. So they can do the same thing. They can install that, and every plugin and whatever queries it's making to the database, they can actually see that, and they can understand if a plugin is requesting too many database requests, and they can probably combine that some way. So that is mostly a development solution, but I'm pretty sure you can make a few Google searches and find out. And maybe I'm not really sure if the P3 performance optimization plugin is still maintained, but I think it's not. Maybe it was updated a couple of years ago, latest. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this out, and I'm going to add the link to that in the description of this webinar once it's over. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, just a second. Another one. Where can I get these metrics? I don't remember what you were talking about back then.
Metrics, if you're talking about the CWE or Core Web Vitals, then the entirety of all the documentation is available on Google's website. It's called web.dev. So WEB, web.dev, web.dev. You'll find it there. So Google has also talked about what they've done, how it's evolved, and out of all the metrics that they could have chosen, why choose only these three metrics, and how to optimize and how to measure, and a lot of specifics there.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to another one. All right, I guess this one. Image management is one problem of WordPress. It doesn't support web and by default. Maybe not yet,
Right.
but in the future, I
Yeah,
believe.
we never know. Yeah, WebP, as I said, you can use plugins, because even if WordPress doesn't have a lot of features, but you use plugins anyway, right? So why not just have an image conversion plugin for WebP? And Imagify plugin I was talking about, the WebP conversion part is completely free. So even if you have 1,000 images on your website, convert for free. Now SVG, I don't know. I have no idea if WordPress will add SVG support, but usually what I've seen is SVG as an image, a lot of people don't have. For example, if you're creating images for your blog posts, you're not going to use SVG. You're going to use PNG. SVG is used for maybe your logos and all that. So for that, you can anyways, a lot of times the themes will also support it. So I think Astra currently does not, but it's planned already in the future updates that will support SVG icons as well. So that's one thing that you can look forward to.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to another one. All these will also apply for mobile.
Absolutely. I didn't mention it, but mobile first has been around for many years now. So desktop traffic is already maybe 30% of entire web traffic. So mobile is the thing. And as I mentioned, I gave the example of specifically that if you're trying to touch something on your phone, and FID, the metric I was talking about, you can't input. So mobile phones, it definitely applies to mobile. And I would say it applies more to mobile phones than it applies to desktops.
Yeah, totally. Those new metrics, I believe, they are like totally focused on mobile user experience. And meanwhile, those old ones, like the speed, like it used to be for desktop, let's say. Yeah, that's all right. Thanks. Thank you, Ravash. All right, let's move on to another one. All right. Oh, just a second. Oh, look, this one is for you.
Okay. You're brilliant. Maybe it's for you. I don't know. Maybe we both are brilliant.
No, it's for you.
Thank you. I don't know who it was meant for, but I'll take the credit anyways.
It was for you, I remember. All right, let's move on to another question. So I'm with SiteGround for my DNS. How do I switch to Google domains?
Okay, so if you have a site, you have, as I mentioned, we have two solutions, right? You have Cloudflare and you have Google Domains. If you want to use Google Domains, you will have to transfer your domain to Google Domains, and whatever fees that incurs, I'm not really sure about that, depending on SiteGround's fees. And if you don't want to do that, you don't want to pay the money, then what you can do is just transfer over your name servers to Cloudflare. And what that means is that, let me again go back to the phone book analogy. So you have a phone book and you have the actual entry for your website in the phone book. So what you do, the DNS is the phone book and your entry is your name server. So if you change over your name servers to Cloudflare, then you are getting all the benefits of the premium DNS while you not having to move your domain from one place to another. All right, does that make sense? So with Google domains, it's the classic transfer process. Which happens with any host, that you go through the transfer process and transfer the entire domain. But you don't want to do that. Cloudflare is also a great option.
Perfect. As well, here's a reply to your answer.
You're breathtaking. I'm Keanu Reeves. I didn't know that.
All right, let's move on to another one. This one is quite broad. What should be ideal size of image?
This is a great question because it depends entirely on your theme first. And in size, I would like to clarify. In size, we're talking about resolution, not the amount of kilobytes or megabytes it takes. So there's an easy way to find this out. If you go into your WordPress settings, you have maximum image width, right? There's a setting inside WordPress. Or if you use Imagify, what it will do is it will detect that for you. So if you install Imagify, go to the settings. We have actually done a video about image optimization on our channel. So you can go check it out. I've talked about this specific point, which I'm talking about right now. It'll detect the ideal image width for you, the maximum that your image supports. And also because you also want to support Retina devices, so it'll multiply it by 2. So for example, if your maximum image or maximum width that your theme supports is 1300 pixels, then I'll recommend that maximum width of an image that you should have is 2600 pixels, so that you can also serve Retina devices without losing image quality. Right? I hope that makes sense. Vivek Gusani. All right? I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to another one. You already touched on this subject. What are pingbacks, trackbacks, and transient options?
Okay, so these are ideally 3 different things, but I'm not really sure the difference between pingbacks and trackbacks are. Pingbacks, what I understand is pingback is something going from your website to another website, and trackback is you keeping track of the pingbacks that you're coming. I might be completely wrong about this, but usually it meant was if you had one WordPress website and you mentioned one more WordPress website, then your website will ping that site saying, all right, I have linked to you. And then they'll just get a notification inside their admin area that, okay, one website linked to you. Now, this was maybe when you had hobby blogs, it made sense. It was a kind of a community thing, but nobody uses that anymore much. And talking about transient options, they are like, it's a way internally caching works in WordPress. It's the easiest way to explain it. Transient options, like without getting technical, or I might be oversimplifying quite a lot. Let's take, for example, you have certain queries that need to be answered from the database. And again and again, same data is being fetched from the database. So similar to how caching works, that data can be cached internally in WordPress. And that is technically like oversimplifying how transients works, right? So transients are internal. You don't have to configure them. But as I mentioned it in one outlier example that happened with me, for some reason, for some configuration changes that I made to my website, what happened was that transients are automatically deleted after some time. But on my website, it did not happen. So the transient data took so much space, or I don't know, resources, that it like completely took the performance of a website to a halt. So that's why I recommended that just do it maybe a couple of months, or maybe just try it out once and see if you are getting great improvement, because transients can also be requested by plugins. So if plugin is requesting data, maybe they can request transient. So it's not how exactly, I cannot tell you exactly how many times or how frequently would you need to optimize your database, unless I know exactly what each of the plugins or themes are doing, right? So just make sure, try it out a couple of times, and then decide the frequency yourself, how frequently you want to optimize your database, right?
Perfect. All right, let's move on to another one. How to manage with Astra JPG WebP image switch for every customer.
Okay, so I'm not really sure if Astra has anything to do with, because I think your question is how to manage the transition between JPG to WebP image, right? So I already answered that. If you use the Imagify plugin, what it will do is suppose you have all the JPG images on your website. It'll take those JPG images, make a WebP version of that. It'll not delete the JPG versions. So now you have the JPG version, and now you have the WebP version. That's perfectly all right, because storage is much cheaper than bandwidth, right? So storage is cheaper. So you can have multiple images. It's not going to affect your server resources, and static idle lying images on a website is not going to affect your speed. So you can have 2-3 copies, and even WordPress makes multiple copies of a website of your images in different sizes, if you already didn't know. So once you use Imagify, coming back to the point, you will have a JPG version and also have a WebP version. And when somebody lands on your website, then Imagify will detect automatically that if the user's browser supports WebP. And if it does, it will just throw the WebP image in front. If it does not, it will take the JPG version. So you don't have to do anything. That's the best part. You don't have to do anything, and that is one of the problems if you do it manually. If you just convert your images to WebP and upload it to a server, that is one of the problems that you're going to run into. So that is why using Imagify is one of the best solutions that you can have.
All right, thank you. Oh, just lost the questions. Just a second. All right, there are so many questions. All right,
okay.
so all right, so let's touch this question. It's like more like a comment, but maybe you'll have some advices. All right,
Okay.
I disable hot linking on my sites, but many of my clients ask for it to be re-enabled because they are linking to resources from the site in their email campaigns, for example.
So now looking at that, I don't think hot linking has anything to do with it, because if you're linking to a specific resource and maybe it's on a website, then maybe I'm missing something, but hot linking can still safely be disabled unless hot linking, again, going back to the point that you're taking resources that are hosted or are part of one website and displaying them on another website while using the resources of the first website, right? So let's take, for example, you have one website, you have everything here, and you're sending an email campaign out, and you are directing all the visitors just to this website. Then there is no need for hot linking. Or even if there is, or if you have two copies, just make a copy of that resource, just put it there, unless you have a compelling reason to not do so. Does that make any sense, Simon? If you have follow-up question, do ask that. I'd like to clarify more about what the problem is.
All right, thank you. All right, the next question is right here. So what are your thoughts?
This is interesting because I am not a developer by any means. So my thoughts will be completely useless here. But yeah, I've heard good things about React because as Astra users, we have developed the customizer in React, and it has given us great performance improvements in terms of that. So maybe I've also seen I think some companies trying this out using headless WordPress, and they're building the front end with Node and React. So maybe look into some of this. But I'm assuming that it will have better performance, but then it's not really meant for beginners, because even I can't. I'm an experienced WordPress user, but I can't code for saving my life if I had to, and I can't build a front end in React or something. But the internal technology or the internal JS, I don't know if that can be replaced with the core JS can be replaced with React. I am not the right person to answer that question. Maybe we'll have some of our developers look at this question and answer it in a more technically savvy way than I can.
All right, thank you. And the next question, you already answered this one, but I'm gonna display it one more time for everyone who's still wondering.
So I recommend Imagify. We've already done a couple of videos about them. If you go and search our channel, you'll find two videos. One is how to serve images in next-gen formats. That is specifically for WebP conversion. And also we've done how to compress images on your website. That is completely about the compression and the resizing part. I also explain all the details there as well. So make sure to check out all those videos, and you'll have a more realistic understanding of these settings, and you'll also see backend information how Imagify can save you a bunch of time. And even the UX inside the plugin is very easy to understand. You can go back to a previous version of the image, and you'll see a visual representation of how much compression you should actually apply. So there are a lot of good things about Imagify that I did not mention, but I personally used it, so I can definitely recommend it. So I would recommend that check out those videos.
Thank you. All right, the questions, they keep coming.
That's pretty
all
good.
Right.
That's what you have.
All right. So let's move on to another one. Right. So choosing hosting, should we also see the security feature as they are a crucial part?
Right. I would say this is, I don't have the numbers, but if I remember reading something about this, that maybe 30%, I might be wrong on this. Okay. So 30% of hacks happen because of a hosting issue, but a lot of the issues or security issues happen because plugin or themes are insecure by themselves. So for example, if you know the Panama Papers leak that happened, if you know the biggest document leak in the world, which revealed a lot of tax fraud and whatever, not going into specifics, that hack, which leaked around 1 terabyte of documents, that happened because somebody forgot to update a plugin on their website. This is truth. I'm not making this up. You can go and Google this stuff. It's on Wikipedia as well. And I've mentioned it one of the videos that we've done, that this happened because they forgot. And as I mentioned, it does not that don't mean every update has some security. But if there is a 0-day vulnerability out in the world, for example, Elementor had a similar issue a while back. They had a 0-day vulnerability which was reported to them. We also had a recently similar kind of issue on one of our plugins, and we fixed it instantly. And security companies are very, I would say, cooperative in this sense. So they will report the issues to the developer first, and they'll ask for a fix, and only then they'll mention this in the wild. Now, again, I'm not saying this is the only source of information. If there's a hacker out there who have this information, they can hack your website. So ultimate idea is hosts are a very small part of security. You have to ensure that plugins and themes are also secure. And of course, frequent updates is a good sign of security. It's not a guarantee for security.
Thank you. All right. The next question is more like for me. I have an old domain from name silo and will link it hosting or host DNS. Is that will be enough for the speed of the website, or should I buy from Hostinger? Maybe you mean that buying domain name or what? You can transfer your domain name to Hostinger in any case, and you can use Cloudflare, but with a lot of plans, Cloudflare is included for free at Hostinger.
All right.
So
I hope that answers.
Yeah.
If I clarify, most of the times, if you transfer a domain from one host to the other, they usually won't allow you to use their name servers. For example, if you have a domain name from maybe name silo, so you can't just go and change your name servers to another hosting company without purchasing some services. This is an exception with Cloudflare because they offer a free tier. And with Google Domains, as I mentioned, you will have to have or transfer the domain, which is what you need to do with any domain provider, that you need to transfer the domain over to them for them to manage your DNS.
Yeah, thank you for adding up. And let's move on to another question. Can we use multiple cache plugins?
I wouldn't recommend it because it's going to cause more problems than it's going to solve. Just choose one plugin and spend time in optimizing your website with one plugin rather than using two plugins, or use different kinds of caching. Right. For example, you might have a page cache, then you can have a varnish cache to optimize. So spend time on that part rather than choosing plugins, because plugins are ultimately going to do the same thing, maybe minimizing your JS and CSS and similar aspects. So you're just going to cause more conflicts on your site.
Yeah, it's gonna be more harmful than helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's like having two girlfriends. Don't try it.
Yeah. Don't try it. Just a headache,
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to another question. You mentioned the DNS quality of who you host your domain name with. How can you tell the speed or performance of the service you are using?
So there are plenty of tools out there, or plenty of services that you can just plug in your domain into, and they'll tell you how fast your DNS is actually responding. It's pretty simple. Just Google the term DNS performance checking or something, and then you'll be able to check out. And then I don't know if the benchmarks are also available, but what you can do is maybe if X is the number that you come up with first host, and then maybe do some benchmarking with some other host, and then you'll be able to identify which host or which DNS service is performing better for you.
Thank you for your answer. All right, the next question: how to eliminate render blocking resources?
This is again, if I give you a specific answer, it's likely to break your website, because I don't know what you are hosting on your website. You might have dynamic content, you might have a lot of things. So you need an expert help who can look at your site and then give you this answer. And again, if this is a huge issue with your site, then spend the resources, or if you can justify it. Otherwise, if you are still green in the CWEs, then just move on temporarily for now. And then once you have the resources that you can spend, then just get a developer to fix it for you. Or it might be that some caching plugins do a good job. For example, WP Rocket and other plugins that we mentioned, they might be able to fix it, but I cannot reasonably give you that answer without understanding your site first. So make sure to test out all the options.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. Let's move on to another one: how to solve cookie-free domains. Any tips on that?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, so I won't be able to give you a decent answer. So I'm sorry, I have to pass. If you have something to add, maybe just give your comments on this.
Not really. I remember I was looking for information how to solve this issue, but I couldn't find anything.
That's a good question. I'll study up and probably write a question, or we'll probably do a video on our website or on our channel regarding this. This is a nice topic. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
for your answer. And the next one is
Bradford.
for
Yeah.
me, I guess. Can I ask about hosting? Or the pricing plans look really inexpensive? Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
So with Kinsta, pay $75 per month business plan, but the Kinsta equivalent is $3.99 per month. Is this wrong? It depends what type of hosting you have at Kinsta. Maybe you have a cloud hosting or whatever.
Yeah.
At Hostinger, we have a business shared web hosting, and yeah, it could be $3.99, but it's not cloud hosting.
All
So you
right.
should check out the hosting which you have right now, and you should look for a close alternative at Hostinger. Usually, our prices are lower than competitors, and our services are
Right.
amazing. All right.
Right. Thank you,
Uh,
Bradford, for your question. You've asked like 3, 4 questions. I really appreciate that you're asking all the questions that you have in your mind.
yeah, yeah, Bradford, you are
Yeah,
MVP.
you're breathtaking. You're breathtaking.
Yeah, you are breathtaking. Just a second. All right, the next question sounds like this: what to do for reducing render blocking time? Any tips on that?
Again, this is the same kind of thing that I cannot give you a good answer without understanding your website. So what I would say is just look at the plugins that we recommend, and depending on the kind of content, you might have to have a different solution. So look at maybe WP Rocket, Nitro, Pack, and they might have inbuilt solutions for this problem. So if I start talking more technical details, it's going to be more counterproductive because I might tell you something which you might try and then have bad results. So I would say go with the basics. If you suppose you go for WP Rocket, you try out the plugin, install it, and then because they will include some limited support with each of their paid plans, you can maybe ask them that, okay, this is my website and I want to do this, and they will take a look from their professional eye and tell you a better solution that I can ever do without looking at your site.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to another question. How do I
Okay.
manage change to a new image optimization plugin, Imagify? Wow.
Okay, so I'm assuming you asking how to change to a new plugin, and you're already using a plugin. If that's my assumption, so I think there's no specific process required. Just disable the old plugin and opt in for the new one. And regarding the optimization, what Imagify does is it'll try to detect if your images are already optimized, and it might do a great job. It might not do a great job. So you can ignore the image optimization or existing images. You can ignore the images that are already present on your website. And what you can set it up is that only the images that you now add on your website will be optimized. You can still convert the old images to WebP, but not optimize them once again. You have bulk optimization tools, but you don't, or you have the choice of not using it. So this is the way I would actually recommend transitioning to Imagify.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the answer. And we have another question, a really good question. What do you think? Page builder like Elementor and Divi slow down a website? What do you think?
It's a well, in reality, it's slowing down is more of a not the right term I would like to use. They definitely will have some slow performance compared to a clean theme. But again, as I've said, if you are in the green lit area of the CWBs, you are good because they're doing a lot of performance or they're giving you a lot of options to work with, which you don't get with traditional WordPress, right? You don't get that with Gutenberg yet, right? So if somebody is giving you more functionality, then we can at least expect some sort of, I would say, drawback as well. So currently that's performance, but these teams they're fantastic teams and they are working day and night to improve the performance. And as you probably seeing that Elementor has been responding to comments recently that they are focusing on performance improvements, and even we are focusing on performance improvement. So don't think of a slight degrade in performance as the end of the world. If your website is comparable with your competing 10 websites, top 10 websites, you are still okay to just use these, because again, you can use a blank 2021 theme and have fast performance, but is it going to be a good experience? No. So focus on the experience first, and if speed is degrading your experience, only then focus on improving it. Right. And even with Elementor, you can use all the solutions that I mentioned. Even if you're using Elementor, then you can use all these solutions and have a fast loading website. And one of the recommendations I would like to give, if you're using Elementor and a premium version of that, this is a beginner mistake, and I've made this myself when I was starting out testing something out. Don't create every page with a page builder. just use the theme builder to create a layout and then use that. This is one pro tip that I would like to say. Then the performance will be much faster than compared to that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for a great answer. All right, let's move on to another one. And this one sounds like that. Have you noticed Cloudflare slowing your time to first byte, and should that matter?
I've seen reports, but I don't have any conclusive data to tell you that okay, it happens with everybody. Sometimes it might happen. Maybe some people have a time thing that they had a glitch in the system. Maybe the network is down. I don't have data to support that. Okay, this definitely happens for all websites. So I'm gonna say no.
Perfect. All right, the next question sounds like that. Trying to know if Astra Layout Builder plus CSS is faster than using Elementor.
Of course, it is faster, but as I said, we are comparing apples and oranges, right? We don't have Astra does not have the same functionality Elementor does, and Elementor does not have the functionality that Astra does. So it's not wise comparing the speed of two different plugins. We don't compare speeds of maybe a small minivan to Bugatti Veyron, as I said. So again, speed is relative. Does the speed affect your website so much that you are failing all the tests in the Core Web Vitals? If it is, then you should think about it, because taking a performance hit in terms of if you can improve the user experience while taking a small hit in performance, that's worth it at this time, right? Unless Google changes their definition of again Core Web Vitals again. But right now, provide a great experience and optimize for those three metrics, LCP and all that. And even if your website or complete page does not load like this, it's all right. You can work with it.
All right, awesome. All right, the next question. To optimize page speed, do we have to work with code, or is it sufficient to use plugins recommended by you to
So
optimize?
simple answer is, can you work with code? If I gave you access to code, would you be able to optimize it? If you can, then definitely yes. But if you can't, then use plugins.
Yeah, absolutely. Plugins are easier,
Right. You don't code every app that you want to use on your phone, right? You just download an app.
Yeah,
It's much easier.
absolutely. All right, the last question. Can
Now,
domain service, the guy meant domain service, affect your
okay.
ranking in Google?
So it's not a direct correlation that, okay, slow DNS is going to affect your website's ranking, but slow DNS again will cause some performance lag and it will affect your CWE scores. And how far you are along that line will be a factor in the Google's algorithm, right? So CWE is not the only factor that Google considers. Links, authority, content, uniqueness, and all those things are also part of that. So CWE is also a small part. So looking at the bigger picture, the answer would be yes, but how much, or is it definitely okay that you have a slightly slower DNS? Will it mean that you will go down in rankings for every maybe half a millisecond or half a second that your DNS is slower? No, but it is a correlation. But how much? It's not linear or directly correlated to that, right? So just make sure that you have CWEs in all the greens, and even if your DNS is not the fastest, and this is one of the things that you can quickly change, right? It's the easiest one to do. You just go and set up Cloudflare or transfer to Google domains. So even if your website or DNS is slow, you can fix it quickly. So it's not a huge issue in my opinion.
All right, thank you, Raj. I guess that's it. That was the last question. Wasn't expecting that it's gonna take 2 hours, but
Thankfully, my
the
mobile data survived.
information. Oh
I was,
man,
yeah.
at one point we had like over 100 live viewers, so that's
That's nice.
quite
That's pretty
interesting.
awesome,
That's
right?
nice. So thank you for amazing presentation. Thank you for
Thank
sharing
you, thank you
information.
for having me. It
And
was a blast. I had a lot of fun. Yeah.
absolutely, we had so much fun, and it was amazing to hear your insights, your examples.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And do you have any offers, special deals for our?
Unfortunately, I could not get that in time, but yeah, I'll leave links in the description for this video if you have any
Yeah,
special offers coming up. So who is watching on our channel, make sure to check out the description later once this video becomes an actual video instead of a live webinar. I'm going to leave some links down
absolutely.
there.
As well, I would like to invite our live audience to subscribe to our
Yeah,
channel,
yeah,
to Hostinger Academy,
definitely.
and to
Subscribe to Hosting Tag Me.
Brainstorm Force. Yeah,
Yes, Brainstorm Force, exactly.
yeah. So I guess this is it. Thank you for watching,
Yeah, yeah.
and it
And
was real nice to have you here.
yeah, everybody who asked questions, everybody who came to actually watch us present this, thank you a lot, because if you were not watching, I would not have had this much fun in presenting or answering these questions. So thank you everybody who came, and make sure to subscribe to both our channels, because we do a lot of helpful content and regular basis for WordPress beginners, because that's our target audience, and hosting obviously is also has produces a lot of content. So make sure to subscribe both channels for great videos that are coming up. And of course, we'll plan more live sessions if you turn up in these numbers, and of course, if you can suggest great topics that we can tackle in the next few live webinars, that'll be great as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I guess
All right.
see you next time, guys.
All right. Ciao. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye bye.
Have a great time. Bye bye.